Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome a very senior and accomplished professional from California, USA, Joan Menke Butler. Joan, welcome to the show.
Welcome. Thank you for inviting me.
Joan is a life mastery coach and a consultant. So, Joan, before we talk about about coaching and consulting, tell me a little bit about your own journey and how did you become so passionate about supporting individuals with their life visions?
Interesting question. So I am originally from the Midwest in USA, and I'm from a family of 10, including my parents. When I was a toddler, I was the fourth. My mom gave birth to two twins, a boy and a girl, about 2 pounds and 4 pounds, and they had physical and emotional and mental disabilities. And it took a great resource in terms of financial, emotional, psychological toll in our family. And right after they were born, my mom was pregnant again. So there was a lot of challenges in our family with that. And what I learned very early on, which actually I think all of our challenges are also our gifts.
Right.
I became very self-sufficient really early on. But what I learned as a young adult is that there's a term called sufficient in an insufficient way. When you haven't really been mentored, and it was just because my parents were overwhelmed. They had a lot going on, right? But I slowly learned to get mentors in my life to help my journey. And so one of the things I was going to talk to you today about was I wrote an ebook called How to Turn Your Side Hustle into Your Dream Life. I started with with your dream business, but really people kept coming to me with all kinds of things for side hustles that were relationship because they had worked so hard. They put that in the back burner, or their health. So one of the things that happened to me is, we usually attract people that are like-minded in many ways. And I was sort of midlife when I went back to retrain to become actually a therapist at the time, a marriage family therapist. And there was no one in my family that was an entrepreneur, so it was kind of really different for me. And I went through all this schooling, and I was basically driving like an hour into San Francisco about 4:30 in the morning, and I would do what I would call my main gig. And then my side hustle was to go in the afternoon and do my internships because I had a master in clinical psychology. And I really wanted to work with people. And so about a year and a half into it, I was driving into San Francisco 4:30 in the morning, and I had no feelings from my elbows to my fingertips. I had carpal tunnel so severely. I was on a headset taking 500 calls a day. And it was with managed care, which in the Bay Area was the one way, if you were pre-licensed, that you could get work, you could get benefits, you could get a decent salary. And I thought to myself, my body was really calling me. It was saying, you're not doing what you love to do. You want to work with people. And so it was like the defining moment that said, you do something different. You need to really listen and do something different. And so I decided to take some time, get my own mentor, and start to work until my side hustle became my full-time gig, and I was working with people.
Amazing. Yeah. Thank you for sharing such an amazing journey that you've had. But tell me also a little more about, you work with a lot of people as a coach and consultant. What are some of the common barriers you've observed that hold people back from cultivating confidence?
Yeah, good question. So a lot of it is feeling we deserve it. A lot of it is really feeling that we deserve it. And sometimes it's not conscious at all. Sometimes it's very unconscious or subconscious. So it's a deserving that we all need a little bit of what I call a booster rocket. When a rocket's going up off the ground and we're wanting to do something in life, rockets have booster rockets that help them get off the ground because the gravitational pull back to the familiar is so great. But that booster rocket is what helps you get up and moving and past some of the things that are holding you back from the confidence that you need.
And that is the booster rocket you help people to develop.
That's what I help people. Exactly.
Fascinating.
And that's one of the things I want to say to you is for years as I worked as a therapist, it was listening to people's stories. And people's stories are very important because that's a part of who they are. But then what started happening was people were actually pushing me. They wanted more. And what I realized is George Washington Carver said, without vision, people perish. And what I realized is there's a time to tell the story. And then there's a time to really get busy with creating the vision that you would love for your life. If you don't have, you kind of perish. You don't go anywhere.
Very interesting. And Joan, how do you guide clients in distinguishing between personal and professional matters?
So say more about that, Ash. Say a little bit more about that question. I'm curious.
What I'm asking you is that, you talk about distinguishing between personal issues and professional issues. How do you guide clients to be able to differentiate?
Okay. So I don't think that it's like, if someone is having difficulty in their professional life, it's going to translate into their personal life. And if they're having some difficulties in their personal life, it's going to translate into their professional life. There's really, it's who we are, right? And so it's going to show up. It might be showing up here right now, but it's going to show up over here as well pretty soon. It's not over. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So a few minutes back, you spoke about your ebook, Make Your Side Hustle, Dream Your Full-Time Reality. And you very kindly offered a copy of an ebook to people who would like it free of charge. So, you could give us your email ID, but tell me about the book and some of the concepts that you have in your book.
Yeah, sure. So many times when people they have a side hustle and they're doing their full-time gig, sometimes you can get really discouraged. You get stuck, like it's never going to happen. You can say, how am I going to do this, right? So the first thing is that individuals need to really set a time. They need to say, okay, by next year, I want to be in this and make it my full-time business. Or I want it. A lot of times people will say, my side hustle now is really to have the relationship that I love because I've never taken time for it, or I haven't taken time for my health. So the first thing is to say, okay, you benchmark a date. The second thing that's going to be really important is that you take and you carve out in your calendar the days or the times or the nights that you're going to do it. So if you're working Monday through Friday, maybe it's Tuesday and Thursday night. You're going to carve out some time to actually work on that goal to make your side hustle your full-time gig. The third thing is you need to look at, to make sure it's really the right thing for you, is what do you spend time doing in your off hours that you're really interested? What books do you read? What do you talk about with your friends? What do you investigate and research? Because that's going to tell you what you're really interested in. And what you need to do is figure out at least 2 skills that you don't currently have that you're going to need in your full-time, whatever that is, right?
Right.
And then, of course, I always say, go get professional help. Someone who's going to beside you, giving you the encouragement you need along the way.
Very interesting. And what is your email ID, just in case people want to write to you?
Okay, so it's Joan, Joan, at rcchange, the word change.com.
Okay, wonderful. Joan at rcchange.com. So those of you who would like to reach out and get a copy of Joan's ebook, please write to her, and I'm sure she will send you a copy. So moving on now, Joan, let's talk a little bit more about relationships, and that's an area that you have done a lot of work in. How has the landscape of relationship dynamics changed over the years? And how should people adapt to these shifts?
Okay. So there's a saying that it's not the most successful people the most successful people are not the wealthiest.
Mhm.
They're not the most intelligent,
Mhm.
but they're the ones that adapt to change the best.
Right.
And life is always changing. And that's true for relationships. Relationships are changing. There's more choices these days, right? There's no right or wrong. It's just depending on what you want for your life. How do you want your relationship to look? And then with your relationships, it's being able to have a conversation of what works for you in your relationship. I mean, as we know, and if you're talking about, relationships in terms of marital relationships or partner relationships,
Yep.
We know that it's very different these days, right? Sometimes it's the dad that's raising the kids, right? And as long as that's agreeable to both people and that's what they want, then it's being able to have the choice to do that.
Interesting. And in what ways do you think modern relationships differ from those of previous generations? And how does this affect some of the work you do with people?
So I want to make sure I understand your question. Say it one more time, Ash, the question.
What I'm saying is that, over the generations, relationships have evolved and changed. Yes. I'm from the boomers generation, and today we've got, the Gen Zs and the millennials. Right. How do relationships differ and have evolved over the years? And what kind of work do you do with people in these relationships?
Well, first of all, is I listen. I listen to see what their longing and what their discontent is. Okay, those are the two spiritual secrets is that we all want to listen to. Is what is our longing in that relationship and what is our discontent? And I think that more and more as we evolve, we honor the soul in terms of what it really loves and what it wants, the longing, and what the discontent is. And when we truly listen in, because those things are from the heart rather than the pros and cons of the mind, right? Pros and cons are the logical mind, but the longings and discontent are of the heart. And so I think more and more as generations go on, they're honoring more that soul connection to themselves and speaking it more in their relationship in terms of not what society says they must do, but truly what their longing and discontent is and honoring it with each other.
Interesting. Joan, you're also doing a lot of work as a life mastery coach. Tell me a little bit about the work you do as a life mastery coach.
Yes. So a lot of my work there's four aspects of it. There's the blueprinting. There's where we find out, like you come to me like you would an architect, but I'm the mental architect. And you tell me specifically what you want, because what each person wants is very different.
Right.
I help you calibrate the vision to what you want. And most people, when they start out, they might not know, and that's okay, right? And lots of times people start with what I call there's avoidance goals or approach goals. Avoidance goals is a part of the process. It's like, well, I don't want that kind of relationship, or that's not the kind of work I want, right? And then we get through that to the point where we start to become working with approach goals. And those are the things that you do want. Those are your longing. So the blueprinting is calibrating it to approach goals in terms of what you want.
Right.
Then what the second part is bridging. Bridging is the gap between your blueprint of what you want, and then there's the gap to where you want to be, right? And so that's what we start to do is bridging from where you are to where you want to be. And a part of that is the confidence piece that you were talking about, Ash, where we work on the confidence piece. And then we move into building the dream.
Mm-hmm.
There's a saying, you know, with decision, you have to make a decision. So we have to design, and then we have to decide for the dream.
Mm.
The word decide is to cut away from. So when we're making a decision, we're making a decision to cut away from some things that we've maybe had habits or ways of being.
Mm.
We're deciding for what we want in terms of our vision.
Mhm.
And that's our green growing edge.
Right.
And build, then we move into harvesting the dream so that you're in the actuality of having the vision, not on paper, but in real life.
Very interesting. And what would you say are two spiritual secrets to listen to that will guide you to your own life vision?
So the spiritual secrets are listening to the longing and the intent. Because so many times it could be our upbringing, it could be things that we heard as a child, it could be the way society tells us. We discount maybe. Well, I really would love to do that, but I don't know if my friend would like it, right? So it's really listening in to the longing and the discontent. One is the longing is sort of pulling you towards something, the discontent is pushing you away. And when we listen to that, our life gets easier and more joyous. And when we don't, it shows up either physically. It was like me when I was in that job and I knew that that's not the work I wanted to do. It physically showed up, and it will show up, either as not feeling well or not being happy. Yeah.
Interesting. And when you're talking to so many different clients with all kinds of, their own personal or professional challenges, how do you maintain a balance between empathy and objectivity?
Very good. Very good question. Very good question. Well, I always think that there is a big difference between sympathy and empathy. Empathy is that I can get right in the trenches with you, and I can hear you and I can feel you, but I also know that there is a divine in you that can absolutely move past that. Right. And so my objectivity comes from that you have that inside of you. Much as in the moment it might be difficult or you fight stuck, I always say, believe in my belief until your belief is strong enough that you can do it.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Well said. My next question is that, in today's day and age, with so much of technology coming in, how do you see the role of online therapy and coaching? Because I'm sure post the pandemic, a lot of your clients would have gone on to Zoom.
That's right. That's right. I think it's really interesting. Before the pandemic, I would have never had believed that we could be doing what we're doing, Ash, right now.
Absolutely right. Yes.
And it's so beautiful because it makes the world so much smaller, that we can reach across the world and communicate with each other. It's just lovely. It's beautiful. And understand each other and learn from each other, right?
Very interesting. So I have time for one more question, and this is for you personally. For someone who has worked with relationships, for someone who's a life master, helping people manage their lives, you're a consultant. How do you manage and overcome the emotional toll that comes with listening to and guiding individuals through their own life challenges?
Yeah. I've done this a long time. And I love being with people. I love seeing people. And the only way I could continue to do this work is I believe there's a higher power guiding all of us. And with that, even when individuals are in some of the most horrific situations in their life, I know that they have the ability to move forward and make changes. And that's what keeps me going, you know? And then of course I know things to do, right? I know how to go in nature and walk and be. I know how to meditate. You know, I know how to do self-care, because if I don't take care of myself, I can't take any care of anyone else.
Well said. Well said. And on that
Yeah.
note, Joan, thank you so much for speaking to me about your own journey. Thank you for talking to me about so many different aspects of relationships, so many different aspects of coaching. Thank you again for speaking to me, and good luck to you.
Ash, thank you so much for having me on tonight. I appreciate you.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.